Hi, welcome to our new series called Insert Art Here, where we are inserting art into the conversation, much like we insert art into frames. I'm going to be talking with different artists, designers, and creatives, talking about their recent work and how they're adjusting to life during this world-altering pandemic. I'm Steph. I'm the frame designer here at J&T. And my guests this evening are Faler and Carly Glovinski, two extremely smart and talented artists whom I am privileged to call my friends. Welcome, guys. Thanks for joining me.
Hey.
Thanks for having us.
Hi. How are you both?
We're good. We're here.
Good. Yeah. And so before we get started, I just kind of wanted to do a bit of a background. Kim, I don't know if many people realize this, but you used to work at J&T back in the day. But actually, we've all known each other before that at Framers Workshop in Brookline. That's actually where we all met.
Yes.
Yes. So I think I left. Kim, you were hired to replace me, and then Carly showed up at some point.
Carly just showing up at some point.
Just gracing everybody with her presence and wonderfulness, and it was great.
There's a lot of framing shops in this room right now.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of framing history. We learned a lot at Framers Workshop. It was great. So yeah. Mike, if you're watching, hi.
Hi.
So how has this situation affected you guys, like in terms of practice or whatever, staying at home with your child all day? How has it been? Kim.
Okay. It's been a whirlwind. This whole pandemic has sort of turned my life upside down to some extent because I have a 2.5-year-old, and as of March 9th or something, I became a 24-hour parent, and so that's definitely thrown a wrench into a lot of the plans and what I expected May to look like. And but it's also had a lot of silver linings to it in terms of spending time with the family and getting to do the housework and working in the yard that I've been putting off for about 2 years now. So
Nice.
there are some good points to it.
Nice. And Carly, how about you?
Yeah, for me, there's been some changes too. A little bit of shift in how I'm prioritizing my time. My studio is not at home, so I was making, for a little bit, I had set up basically Command Central on my dining room table, which was really asking a lot. But good, I've actually recently taken on a full-time job to just make a little bit more financial stability for my family. So that's taking up some time too when, managing that shift. But all in all, I honestly cannot complain. It's springtime. I want to have my hands in the dirt outside. I would be doing that anyway. I'm grateful to have maintained connections and made new connections with friends online. All of that stuff. I've proven to myself that I'm able to adapt. So grateful for that.
Do you guys find yourself like more or less productive in terms of art making? Or have you not thought about it? Kim, why are you laughing? What do you
mean? Laugh, sort of telling.
So is that a no?
It's definitely changed things around a bit, and the pandemic has also aligned with a sort of exhibition that I'd been working on for 2 years, and so it's made a particular sort of fissure in my life in terms of before and after, and the whole sort of postpartum that you have with a major project, it in itself makes a sort of bookmark in your trajectory, and so this has sort of compounded that with the whole world stopping.
Right.
And so yeah, I mean, luckily my studio is at home, and so it's easy for me to get there. I just walk out the kitchen. And so I have been able to get in here, but it's certainly not of the same rigor that it was prior to the epidemic. And that, I mean, that's taking into account the idea that I was working on an exhibition up until that. So everything is just sort of heightened.
So it's just kind of like everything started and then it just kind of stopped.
Yeah, like literally I installed a show that I had been working on for 2 years at Mass MoCA, and the Monday after I finished, the museum closed. So it's literally hanging in limbo, waiting for an audience to appear. But my work was done, and so the whole thing is very foreign and strange at the moment. But I mean, once things turn around, things will have the same trajectory as that I was hoping.
Yeah. Carly, do you have studio access at all? I don't know like what New Hampshire is like, if you can at all.
Yeah, I do. I work in an old mill building that's maybe a 15-minute drive from my house. It's mostly all small business and artist studios. I do have access to the building. I've chosen to sort of limit that access over the past couple months, but I do go in, you know, maybe 2 days a week. For me, it's this whole condition has lined up with me starting a long-term project that was originally for the fall. My exhibition schedules got all moved forward into more like spring 2021. So I've been able to had, I guess, the luxury of being able to take a little more time and focus on some of these projects that are labor intensive, but without an immediate deadline or as close of a deadline.
What are you looking forward to the most when like the world reopens and you can go outside without restriction?
Hugging Kim's baby. So this is the crazy thing.
Very sweet.
As Kim said, I guess we should, full disclosure, say that Kim and I have been very close for
ever
16 years, 17 years.
I think since before birth, to be perfectly honest.
No one loves that.
It's been a minute.
I was actually set to head out there for Kim's opening for the show at Mass MoCA that she's talking about is literally hanging in the museum right now. And I try to get out there to see her and the baby a couple times a year. So right when all this happened, we had to make that call like, oh no, you're not coming. Like there was a moment where Kim was like, are you coming anyway?
Yeah.
I don't think so. And she's like, what? I'm like, yeah.
That's when I knew it was real.
Yeah, and they were like, oh no, this is serious.
Yeah, I remember at one point you said this is going to be one of those events that is going to be sort of a before and after, and I was like, no. You're
but yeah,
totally right.
What about you, Kim? What are you looking forward to the most?
Just a sense of normality. I hate this whole new normal idea that this sort of uncomfortable way of living is what we have to contend with. And I don't know, you know, just seeing some friends, going out to dinner, the very basic things that we all used to take for granted, and seeing my art that I feel like has been sort of taken from my studio prematurely. It'd be nice to see the show that was supposed to open. So that would be good.
Yeah. So I also wanted to kind of talk to you about your guys' art practice. And I'm really curious as to how you are able to find a balance between having a day job and also making your own work, because you are both really prolific and make really wonderful artwork. And yet I know that you, like Carly, you said you have a day job, and I'm curious to know how you have found a balance, or if you have found a balance between your day job and your being a mother and also making your own work.
Yeah. I can answer. I mean, there is no foolproof way that works. It's always a sacrifice of time or a sacrifice of money, and it's a pendulum that swings between the two as you grow and gain a family and responsibility. I have done a lot of different jobs in terms of I've had the full-time 40-hour-a-week job, I've had the teaching job, I've had the part-time job, and they all have obviously different pluses and minuses. And right now I happen to have a really, I think it's a really great job. It's at a gallery, is my day job, and I only work a couple days a week, but you're able to sort of get the other side of the story in terms of the commercial side and what's expected, and how to organize your studio practice in a way that's coherent outside of your own brain. So I find that really effective. And I think with any of us, any artists, you want to have a day job where you can learn something from it, and it's not just sort of giving, but you're also receiving. And it doesn't have to be in the arts, but something where you're sort of stretching yourself and able to apply something to your art practice. And so I feel like this gallery gig that I have right now is really, really helpful in that regard, because you're constantly interacting with professional artists and understanding what works for them, and seeing the different roads that you can walk down, and understanding that there isn't one way or a correct way, but it's open.
And what about you, Carly? What is I thought you taught when you, but what you said that you recently got a new job. What is that?
I don't teach. I do some mentoring for a low residency MFA program in New Hampshire. So I've been doing that on the side for a while, and I still do that. And then I've also been, my day job for a long time was wearing many hats for a little creative advertising firm.
Oh, okay.
So marketing, graphic design, project management type stuff, not in the art world, but a lot of creative problem solving skills. So I've just taken a job as my official day job title is a creative marketing director. And it's a company that's a tech company outside of Boston. So it's totally different, but there's still a lot of like as Kim's saying, a lot of communication skills, a lot of creative problem solving happening. And it's really interesting. I'm coming to this or scaling up my time into this position after maybe a year of really scaling back and focusing on my work. And, swinging the pendulum back and forth is a very real thing, that swapping time for money. And this time I think it's going to be really interesting. Working for people that really support my art career is a must for me at this point. So I think I've got a good recipe going, and we shall see what transpires, but so far so good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It sounds like that's a good position to be in, and is working for a place that is still creative, but that you don't hate too, which is nice.
Yeah, no, it's quite lovely, to be honest.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
So in terms of your work, you make work that is really much about the materials that you used, I think, as much as it is about the final piece. What comes first? Is it the material? Is it the idea that you're going to make something and you know what it's going to be? Or what inspires what first?
Kim, you want that one or you want me to have that one?
It's all
I mean, you're both going to answer it.
So I think that it's interesting because I always think there's the work that you bring into the studio. There's the ideas that you bring into the studio that are more or less fully formed. And then it's more about chasing that idea. And then there's the work that happens as a result of the process in the studio that sort of comes out of the making itself. I like to really run both of those things in parallel to each other all the time. So I guess my answer would be both. So I love to have give deference to both of those situations, depending, I think the right momentum in the studio cooks up some really good circumstance to make that something come out of the process itself. So I just love to leave room for that, I'd say. Yeah.
Kim?
I would say that it's also a flux between sort of accident and intention. I think in terms of some of the wall-based work, some of the two-dimensional work that I've been making, it's definitely based on an exploration of material, meaning, oh, I definitely want to use this blue foam, or I definitely want to use this weird crystallized necklace form. And then it just goes from there. But with sculpture, it's a little bit different in the sense that I'm thinking a lot more about how the material can inform the work conceptually, in terms of if this piece is about anxiety, what sort of material really enhances that notion of unsettledness or flexibility or uncertainty. And so it's sort of, I don't know, sometimes it's the snake eating the tail, and otherwise it's intentional, but you try to leave them both sort of available to explore.
You said something in your statement that I thought was the most beautiful idea, that you consider the breadth of each material.
Yeah, I mean,
I love that.
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of materials are sort of they have an expectation to perform, you know, like a fabric is expected to cover, it's expected to protect. It has this iteration of clothing that we're all used to. But what happens when you unravel it? It has a completely different story, it has a completely different dialogue. And why sort of talk about one side without the other? I think it's important to talk about the breadth, to talk about the lifespan, to talk about all the iterations, all the different type of storytelling that you can sort of elicit out of a material just by understanding the base of where it begins and where it ends.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. Do you have a favorite piece that you've made, or a series that you've done?
It's the latest one, obviously.
Of course. Yeah.
It's always the last piece that you make. That's how you keep the ball rolling.
True. Are there things like in your past that you're like, oh, maybe I should, like, not that you regret it, but, or anything of like, or not regret anything? That's a dumb question. But I didn't, yeah. I didn't know if there was something in particular that you were like, yes, I nailed that. I'm really happy that came out exactly the way I wanted to.
Go ahead, Carly.
Oh,
yeah, Carly, go ahead.
Oh, I don't know. I guess I don't always think about the work after it's out into the world. It's weird. I guess at that point it's not even mine anymore. I think about it kind of being its own thing. There's certainly, I always say to myself, well, you can't love them all, because if I set the expectation for myself that I was going to end up loving the results of everything I make, I think that I would be in a bad spot. There's a point in a work, I think, when you see what its potential is going to be. And if you see that potential isn't going to be something you love, that's not a reason to not finish it.
Right.
I think that, seeing what's really the best thing for me is being able to make work over a long period of time and see it evolve and change. And sometimes your work involves itself in so many different conversations that sometimes it might take 2 or 3 years to connect dots between a conversation where you left it. And I guess that's a nice thing about starting to have some longevity.
Yeah.
And you two are so close. And I know that your work has probably, people have not compared it to, but found similarities in it. But do you find that your work inspires each other? Like you kind of draw off of each other? Yes? No?
I mean, I think it's impossible not to be affected by the people that you surround yourself with. I mean,
of course. Yeah.
I think Carly and I's train of thought often sort of moves in the same sort of colony of fish, but I think we come from different directions. I mean, Carly and I very much have always said that we are sort of maybe talking about the same thing, but completely different directions. I mean, I come from a very stubborn sculptural background, and she comes from a painting background that she can't deny. It's in her blood, and we sort of both meet in the middle, but it's never the same conversation. It's always sort of slanted with our own language and understanding of that experience or emotion or object. But I think that happens with anyone that you sort of present yourself with 9 times out of 10. If you're surrounding yourself with like-minded people, obviously they're going to influence the work and the decisions that you make.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would definitely say that I don't think where we both make our own work, I don't think either of us would be in the place we are in our own work without each other.
Oh, totally.
I think we really, you know, Kim and I at this point are really valuable to each other. Our friendship has gotten to the point where it's so valuable in times of like those really big decision-making points where I know that I'm going to get a real answer from her. She's going to get a real answer from me. And we both are aware that they're coming from different backgrounds, which is really exciting. Like, I think we've pushed each other to make our own work for a long time. And that's been really nice. So I think the way we've maybe pushed each other is the hallmark, you know, of ourselves and each other's work. But it's so interesting we always have this thing where like, so Kim comes from a sculpture background, I come from a painter background, and we're both like, both of our work, I really feel like ends up meeting somewhere in the middle of that. And, you know, we're always like, oh, you're such a painter. Oh, you're such a sculptor person. So, you know, that's kind of nice to be able to have that kind of dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's precious.
Yeah.
And Kim, I realize it's probably a sore subject, not to rub salt in the wound, but I want to know more about your show that's at Mass Mocha. That's installed and no one can see it right now.
Yeah, no, it's totally fine to talk about. So it's it's a group show called Kissing Through the Curtain, and it's a show about, I think it's 11 artists, and all addressing the idea of translation, whether it's through language, through time, through materiality, through a multitude of sort of examples. But it's a show that I've been working on for the last 2 years for an installation. It's the largest installation that I've ever done. It's composed of 20 sculptures, and they're all enlarged portraits of wads of bubblegum. And so
you have some behind you in your studio.
Yeah, they're sort of back there. So I just took a very basic wad of bubblegum that you would see or have in your mouth and enlarged it to about the size of your head. And all the sculptures are hanging from the ceiling at head height and creating a maze of sort that you're able to navigate through. And in some of the sculptures, there's sound elements that actually initiate the sound of chewing. And so I see the whole installation as a sort of visual representation of the anxiety that we've come to live with, sort of this tight tension. And I feel like a wad of bubblegum is a perfect illustration of that, in the sense that it's this casual yet intimate form that's made in your mouth that when you take a piece of gum out of your mouth, you can't help but look at it. Like, you can't just sort of dispose of it, but you want to see that quick gesture, that natural gesture, that accidental gesture. And I think there's a lot of personality that's found in that. And so I literally photographed pieces of gum and sculpted it up like a traditional sculptor would. And I was fortunate enough to work at a foundry, the Kohler Foundry in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and I was able to cast some in metal. I did some in glass, some in wax, some in gypsum. And so really thinking about what is the material connection to these objects, and how does the material translate something that the object can't by itself. And so all the work, like I said, is of a variety of materials and allows the viewer to sort of view them on a very sort of personal and intimate sort of perspective. So.
And there's also new work that I've seen. It's on your website that it looks like it's almost like a diptych of photographs of hands, like up close.
Yeah. So that was a fun project. So with this show, Mass Mocha, also the curator that I'm working with, Ali Faradas, she also is creating a catalog, and she asked the artist in the show to produce a separate project that is more attuned to a book project. And I had never done a book project, and as Carly will attest to, I was terrified because it's sort of the ultimate two-dimensional project.
You're such a sculptor.
Exactly. And so I was torn with sort of how to approach it, but I kept thinking about sort of the intimacy that is found within the palm of your hand, and how the marks that are made over time, and they have a very specific yet arbitrary sort of map making aesthetic. And so I started photographing the insides of different people's palms of their hands, and created this series of photographs that they were sort of photographs of photographs in terms of, I was really interested in that sort of process, documenting the process of art making and seeing it as sort of a studio-based aesthetic. And so the photographs that are in the book are a series of 5 photographs, but they're photographs of really bad photographs, but it's more about the materiality in terms of like, what is the paper that I'm using to print these photographs on, and how can I interrupt it by cutting it and taping it back together, and things of that nature. So the series is called Almost Nearly, and I thought that was a nice sort of attribute to something becoming almost nearly articulate, or almost nearly specific, or allowing some sort of space in between the understanding, but it also being very familiar.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
That's the latest work that I've been looking at.
They're beautiful.
Thank you.
And Carly, like, so I've seen these pieces of yours that you've been posting on your Instagram account, and they're captured sunsets, correct?
Yeah, it's a piece called Canning the Sunset. Yeah.
They're so cool. They're so beautiful. And it's like, I feel like there's these things that like I did at like Girl Scout camp or something like that. And they're just so beautiful and calming. There's something about them that's amazing. So what made you start working with that?
Yeah, so this project, Canning the Sunset, is a project that we'll end up with hopefully a few hundred of these colored sand landscapes in jars that is for an exhibition that is now pushed to the spring. So I'm able to expand this project. But so I recently did a project about pressed flowers for a show this past fall. And it was a show that was organized around time, and got me thinking about ways we mark time just in different ways. And I really liked thinking about these. I've also concurrently been thinking about souvenirs. It's something that I always think of, actually, like just tchotchkes and souvenirs and things like that, that connect you to a place and connect you to a landscape. So for me, those colored sand jars that you would get as trinkets in like Key West, that are, you know, the beach with a palm tree in a jar. I wanted to rethink that souvenir as a way to capture a landscape and really preserve it. I love the connection to canning. So it's called Canning the Sunset. I love the idea of how can you keep that moment? How can you capture that moment in time that is always fleeting, because time is always moving. So, and it just is a really, the connection to preservation and sort of a make-do frugality, homesteading lifestyle is another theme that runs through my work. So this project felt really right to be working on right now. It has become a bit of a meditative process. It's the only project I'm working on in my studio right now. So I do go very much intentionally to my studio and make maybe 1 or 2 of these, and that's about it. But because the process is so different, and I will say I've had to teach myself this process, which the DIY part of it is, again, totally something that I will jump right into. that's been fun to learn too, like that craft aspect. I'm not trying to be a master at it. I'm just honestly trying to do it. Repetition becomes meditative too. So I'm glad you're getting that from looking at it.
Yeah. I absolutely love them. They're beautiful. So I have one last question for both of you. If money was not an object, what piece of art would you want to own in your collection? Anything you want.
Okay, Steph. Wow.
that wasn't on the list.
It wasn't. I did that on purpose. Yeah, have a drink. Yeah, I'm curious.
See, now I'm immediately like, well, okay, if money's not an object, but we could have a budget, how many pieces could I
It
actually?
doesn't have to be one piece. It can be a couple.
Okay. I mean, if I was just, shopping around, I would love to have one of those Michelle Grabner, the bronze.
Yeah, you would.
Kim, you gotta say one.
Yeah.
Of course, like I feel like anytime anyone asks you about a specific artist, your brain just like goes blank of like, I don't know any artists. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Steph.
And I'm having that moment a little bit right now, but off the top of my head, like the new Arlene Sheckett sculptures are amazing, and I would love to spend some time with some of those. I don't know about owning them, but
Right.
at least exploring them on a sort of intimate level would be great.
Cool.
So
Nice.
Steph, I will say, Steph, that for this exact reason of like just blanking when faced with a question like this,
Yeah.
years ago, Kim and I had created this running email list. The subject title is Artists That We Love.
Oh yeah.
Because
That's so cool.
I
because
want to like look that up now.
Are you looking it up?
I am.
serious, there's some classics. You got
Yeah.
your Jim Hodges on there. It's always
But Jim Hodges, yeah, definitely. I would buy the Jim Hodges like polychromed rocks. Like if I could have like 4 of those in my front yard, I'd be happy.
I would buy many Amanda Ross Ho pieces.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice.
But so this list exists because we both panic in this situation.
Yeah.
Oh, so you guys are prepared. That's good. I like it.
Allegedly.
And I love that you have that list going back and forth. That's awesome.
Yeah, we should restart that again. That was great.
Yeah, you are welcome. You should start that again. Well, I think I just want to say thank you so much for doing this. This is new to me. This has been so much fun, and it was so wonderful to see both of you. I miss you guys, and this was awesome.
Yeah. No, thanks for
you too.
I think a drink with our friends. It's good.
Yes. Cheers.
Cheers.